G'day everyone and welcome to another 100 Things Fireside, where we interview an industry expert, a guru, a professional in a hot topic area of the world of bucket lists so that you can walk away with some gems of wisdom to apply to your own goals. Now, this week's edition is all about flying, how to become a pilot. And we are speaking with an incredible guy called Ryan Campbell, one of Australia's top 50 adventurers, explorers. At the age of 15, Ryan celebrated his birthday by flying a plane by himself for the first time. He then, at the age of 19, circumnavigated the world in a single engine plane by himself. Incredible. Later in his career, he unfortunately had a crash. He went into hospital as a paraplegic and has since rebounded to still fly and teach others how to do the same thing. Ryan's going to be sharing every ounce of wisdom he has, including how to finance something, and you'll be so surprised at how accessible becoming a pilot actually is. Thank you for being here. We hope you enjoy, and here we go. Ryan, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, thanks, Seb. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for doing this. I know you do a lot of this stuff, so I appreciate you coming on board.
You are more than welcome, mate. More than welcome.
So I gave a bit of an intro. You've done plenty in the world of flying, and it's fascinating. And I guess what I'm interested in is, and I ask this all the time at the beginning of these fireside chats, what was the first moment that you were interested or you realized, hey, flying is cool, I want to get into that? Was there a moment?
Yeah, there really was a clear-cut moment. And believe it or not, I was 6 years old when it happened. And it was on an airliner, Boeing 737. And it was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane and the first time that my family had ever traveled overseas, including my mum and dad. And we jumped on this 737. We took off out of Sydney, headed for an island in the Pacific, headed to Vanuatu. And honestly, it was from the very get-go. It was the excitement, all that stuff that builds up in a 6-year-old kid's head, sitting by the window, watching the ground disappear and looking at all the houses, just blown away by the size of Sydney, blown away that all the roofs throughout Sydney were red. I remember that being a thought, and blown away that we could actually fly amongst the clouds. I have no idea at 6 what I thought actually happened when you went flying, but I remember that being a real key moment. So at 6 years old, that first flight, and being prior to September 11, we were actually invited up to the cockpit, and just being that, little set of eyes staring at all the buttons and the switches, and honestly looking at the pilots as they turn around and talk to us as just like gods. And man, it was from that day on, it was just a fact that I would do it eventually.
I remember, it's so funny you say that. I remember as a kid being allowed into the cockpit with my dad, and the pilot allowed me to there's like a little joystick thing, and I went to the left and then I went to the right, and the plane went like that. It went left and right. And to this day, maybe you can answer this. I'm not sure whether I did that or whether he was playing a game.
I have no idea. I'm not sure. Depending on what airplane it was, sure, it could be well and truly exactly that. So, it's not rocket science, but that's cool. And I think gone are the days of that level of accessibility to aviation where, you get to experience it firsthand. The fences are higher and at the airports and the doors are locked. But I was lucky enough, and as were you by the sounds of it, to be around at that point in time.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're inspired at 6 on a plane, no doubt. That's phenomenal. I get it. And then at what point did you go, oh, I want to be a pilot? What was it then? And if so, did you have a specific goal? Did you see these guys in their hats and their ironed white shirts and you were like, I want to be a commercial pilot? Or what was then kind of the process? Because goal setting, is obviously something that I'm intrigued with.
Yeah, and likewise I am too. And a huge part of my childhood was telling people that I wanted to be 3 things. I wanted to fly a jumbo jet. So I wanted to fly a Boeing 747, and I wanted to fly a jumbo jet for Qantas. I wanted to live in Canberra in Australia for some reason, and now I don't know why. And I wanted to own a Subaru WRX. So for me as a young kid, that was my perfect adult life. But I wanted to be an airline pilot. I wanted to fly the jumbo jet, and I wanted to fly for Qantas. And that was the dream. So yes, being a young kid, aspired to the biggest and the baddest and the wildest of the airliners. That was the dream.
Right. Did you get a WRX, by the way?
I didn't get a WRX, and thank goodness I didn't live in Canberra.
So these firesides are for people who have this, ambition of becoming a pilot, of course, for this particular fireside. Now, on a couch, sat down, having not even taken one step in that direction, it might seem quite daunting. And I don't know whether because it's a path that's less traveled or it's less obvious, but it seems as though there's like the accessibility to becoming a pilot is hard. And perhaps that's not, like, I almost want to debunk that myth. Like what is that? What is the first step perhaps that you took? And what is the first step that people on a couch or listening to this right now could actually take to get one step closer to getting in a cockpit and flying?
100%. This is the most important part of this whole chat. I know it already. So if this is the only part you watch and then you go and, switch to Netflix, that's fine. This is the most important part. And every part of my, journey and the people I met surrounding the round the world flight, this was the most frequently asked and answered question. That is, when and how do you start the process of learning to fly? Here's the story, my backstory, to give you an idea of where I think the challenge is with having the general population understand that anyone can fly an airplane or a helicopter. It is so hard to gather to know the answers. It's hard to know the laws, the rules, the regulations. When can you first start learning? When can you first fly on your own? When can you take buddies? When can you have a private or a commercial license and so forth? I wanted to be a pilot since I was 6, and I didn't stop talking about it. I actually had an uncle who was a commercial pilot. He owned a little joy flight business in a small Australian coastal town. And he had a flying instructor that worked out of his same building. So he had somebody right next to him who could teach me to fly. Regardless of the fact that he knew I wanted to learn, he wasn't aware of really the legal ages of how young you could be when you started lessons.
Uh-huh.
So it was left to me to work it out. So through common sense, at 13, I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to get a job because it's going to be expensive. And I'm going to have to at least have a driver's license, be 17, 18 before I can fly an airplane. That was common sense.
Yeah.
Despite my family background in aviation, my dad wanted to fly. My granddad flew when he was alive. My brothers wanted to fly. I found out that you could fly an airplane on your own in Australia for the very first time at 15 through reading a newspaper article.
Wow.
So, I had family in aviation, but I still found that out through a newspaper article. So when I was 14, sorry?
It's so interesting. 15, because you think,
yeah,
you're too young. You've got to, I would have thought, 18 at least.
Exactly.
And get going. But you can fly at 15 by yourself.
Exactly. And the fact that you can, and that's in Australia in recreational aviation. So we'll talk about a few of the different categories of flying, but at 15 or 16, depending on where you're learning, you can fly an airplane on your own. So I read this article about this kid who flew an airplane all by himself at 15, and I was jealous and I was just full of envy. And I read the article over and over again. I kept replacing his name with mine. And I just took that, if he can do it, why can't I attitude. I even found an after school job. Then I found a weekend job and I funded my own flying lessons. My first goal, talking about goal setting, was actually to fly solo on my 15th birthday. And I made that happen. So my biggest frustration with the aviation industry, and maybe it is the uniqueness of flying an airplane or a helicopter, is that those who want to do it simply don't understand how accessible it is at such a young age. Once you understand that, it opens up a whole world of opportunity.
That is amazing. And I love it because you just decided, so you had your goal and then you just did some proactive research and then you realize, like most things, I would suggest, it's very doable. It just requires action. So you did your research, 15, you set the goal, I want to fly at 15 solo, which you did.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many good things in there. You also mentioned it's expensive. Well, I think you did. I'm kind of curious as to that because, again, without knowing, to me, I think, it must be expensive to get a pilot license. Is it, or is that a myth?
I think it all depends on what you think expensive is. I think it is expensive to a point, but it's also very affordable and achievable because it's a large expense spread out over a long period of time. So let's just say right now we live in a world where the facts of how to learn to fly and all of that good stuff is so accessible. So if you jump on Google and you look up the total cost, you just look up the average cost of a private pilot's license. I Googled this right before we jumped on. It says about $10,000. Now, it really ranges. It could be anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000, just depends on where you learn to fly. But here's what I have told every young person that I've ever cross path with in my life. Forget the total cost. Look at the per hour cost. So if it's between 155 and 170 as per Google, and Google's always right, to go for a 1 hour flying lesson, that's what you truly need to know. So when I was 14, I didn't have $15,000. What I had was an after school job that allowed me to earn, it was about $45 a week from my supermarket job and $50 a weekend from my washing trucks job. So I had $190 per 2 weeks, and a flying lesson was $180. So every 2 weeks, I'd put all my money into my flying lesson. I'd have $10 left over, and I was getting an hour of flying. It's really important.
I love that.
If finance is a limiting factor for you, and it is for most people, don't let it be the limit to you learning to fly. Have a look at your local flight school. Now, it doesn't matter whether you want to fly little ultralights or trikes, or whether you want to fly powered parachutes or helicopters or aeroplanes. It doesn't matter what it is. You could fly a fancier aeroplane, a bit cheaper aeroplane. Find out the per hour rate and split it in half. Make sure you're flying once every 2 weeks, because that's what will allow you to retain the last lessons, information, and not forget it all. So make sure you're flying every 2 weeks, split that cost in half, add a little bit for, say, some logbooks and some extra little items here and there, or a flight that goes a little bit longer, and set that as your rough budget. I promise you that if you can earn $150 a week, you can learn to fly.
Oh, that is amazing. I feel silly I haven't done this myself. In that budget, I think this is a crucial question. Were there a pair of aviator sunglasses?
Absolutely zero chance in the world.
I'm a little disappointed. So 15 in Australia, legally allowed to fly by yourself, meaning that you can start beforehand training.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of figure out understand what that training is. Now, not to give us the textbook of what you went through, but I'm assuming there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of, is it ground school? Is that what they call it? And then there's the flight school. What can someone, again, who's interested now is suddenly like, wow, all I need is $150 every other week. Yeah. Do you go straight into a plane? What actually happens?
Yeah. So the coolest part of learning to fly is, I believe, is that first day that you get to take control of an airplane. So you talked about rocking a wing left and right. It's called a trial instructional flight for the most part. So it's that first lesson that you go and you run. It's not an hour. It's probably half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on where you go. You'll sit with the instructor. You'll get a little bit of a basic idea of what you're going to do, but mainly it's all about putting you in the airplane or the helicopter and letting you just experience it. That's what's going to hook you. Then you can decide whether or not that's something you want to pursue. There is a flying component, obviously, and there's a theory component. What I find, especially for someone, say, like my dad, a man who didn't learn to fly until he was in his 50s, the theory component scares a lot of people away. Now, you got to think that it all depends on what type of flying you want to do. If you want to fly privately and just fly for fun on the weekends, you can get a private pilot's license or a recreational pilot's license. That's a whole lot less theory than if you want to go through and get your airline pilot's license or your commercial pilot's license. So the further you go in the journey, there's obviously more and more theory, but it's all achievable theory. You don't have to be an Einstein to turn around and tackle it.
Okay. All right. So then I want to know, again, for someone who's like, right, I'm going to save up $150 for my first lesson. Is there anything you can do in the meantime to help? I don't know what that, like, in my eyes, is watching Top Gun helpful? Or I'm assuming it's not, or maybe it is. What else can you do? Are you learning about, I don't know, weather patterns? Are you learning about the alphabet? You know how they're like
phonetic alphabet, yeah.
What's it called?
It's the phonetic alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, yeah.
Oh, can you do the whole, I'm not going to ask you to, but can you do it all?
Yeah, 100%. And if you want to practice it, the best tip that I was ever given is to learn it roughly. And then as you drive down the road, look at every license plate or number plate, as we would call it, or tag on your car, and call out as they drive past, call out their license plate, in the phonetic alphabet, and you'll know it before too long at all.
So that's something someone can do right away, I'm sure. Any other tips that people should be doing?
There's heaps. And here's the deal. When I took my first flying lesson, I was 14. So it must have been around about 2008. And it was a different world even in 2008 than it is today. With the way that social media works in the aviation industry and just in the world in general, it is unending what you can read and learn about.
Yep.
Where there's two parts. If you want to be educated, you can go and buy all the theory books and you can read to your heart's content. You can Google and learn and soak up all that information, and it will help you. If you just want to maintain inspiration and drive, it's unending. So there's all these flying groups now, the Bush Flying Group, the Flying Cowboys. There's associations such as AOPA, or the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of America, and that spreads around the world, including Australia. All these different avenues of inspiration. One I will say for all the people who are watching this right now, on August 18th this year, so just a couple of weeks away, Microsoft are launching their new flight simulator, and it's the first time they've released it in 15 years. It is the most incredible tool and just sim I've ever seen in my life, and I'm not a big simulator guy. That in itself, for $50 or $100, it has little kind of, flight lessons within it. You can learn the basics. It is incredible. It will never be a substitute for flying lessons. So don't think that you can just get flight simulator and then go and jump in an airplane. That's the disclaimer. But there is an endless world of inspiration, information, to keep you kind of driven and then, get the ball rolling, especially for those who don't quite have the finances yet to commit to actual, 1 hour flying lessons.
It seems so attainable the way you speak about it. And again, so a flying simulator of some sort is helpful. I mean, we had an episode of my show. We took a guy who loved playing a car game, a racetrack car game. And his favorite track was the Formula One Belgian track, and his favorite car was the Nissan GTR. And we actually took him over there, gave him that car, and we raced around the actual F1 track. It was amazing. And I did it too. I was awful. This guy was unbelievable and had never driven a fast car in his life. And it just showed that from the game, he picked up a lot. And again, it's not a direct substitute, but
it's all about exposure. And one of my brothers was the last of our family to learn to fly. And he learned to fly really quickly compared to the rest of us. And that was because he had sat in with us in the airplane, all sorts of different airplanes, fast and slow, ones that went high, ones that went low, all kinds of aircraft. He had sat in and watched. He'd been exposed to the aviation world, and that had helped him pick it up faster. So another thing that you can't look past, as great as technology is, sometimes we need to get off our phone. So go to the local airport, find your local flying club, your local aero club, and go and socialize. You'll find that they'll put you in an airplane. They'll take you for a fly. You'll start to get a bit of a taste and get to know the community.
Oh, so good. Mate, this is brilliant. I truly, I'm inspired by this. I feel like I'm not just saying this. I feel like I'm going to go and do this.
Well, I'm going to make it. And this is the thing, right? If you're sitting on the couch right now and you're like, you know what? Yeah, this is me. Inspiration like that is phenomenal. And that's what, as speakers, we do day to day. Sure. It's so hard to not fall off that wagon. So my advice to every single person is to get on the phone right now. And I'm going to make you do this. I'm going to force you to do this. I have bought gift certificates for people before so that they can complete their trial instructional flight. Sure. Go to your local airport, book a trial instructional flight. It's $200. So it's a ticket to a really nice concert. It's an expensive dinner out. And if you do it and you don't ever pursue another flying lesson, you never get in a little airplane again, that has still been an experience like going to a concert or a theme park. But it also may be the catalyst that changes your life and builds this whole new world of aviation into your life. So.
And your path obviously is very unique and incredible, but you circumnavigated the world at what age?
I was 19. So we flew an airplane that looks just like this. We flew a 4-seat single engine aircraft called a Cirrus. So you could actually learn to fly in a very similar airplane to this. That is the aircraft that I flew solo around the world.
Wow. And the incredible thing for me is, you were 19. So that pathway to being able to fly around the world, which is, that's just something that I think probably everyone dreams of doing. You're able to do that in such a short amount of time to get from novice beginner to I can fly a plane around the world by myself. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And I mean, there's so much to speak about that. One question is, this is a little bit kind of not related, but what's the hardest thing about flying? In my head, it's landing. Is that right?
Honestly, and I really want to just grab that last point you said and expand on it before we forget.
Yeah.
And it kind of relates. I think one of the hardest parts of flying is the finance, to be honest.
Right.
Any skill that we want to learn, for the most part, we can learn it. If we work hard enough, some people pick it up faster than the others and so forth. But the financial aspect of flying, it's very hard to invest in something that's not necessarily tangible. Yes, you have a skill set that you can go and use if you jump in an airplane, but it is kind of hard on the wallet at times. There are a number of ways, especially here in the US, that you can go and obtain your pilot's license to a commercial level, ready for employment through a college or a college, I suppose, or at home in Australia, university. You can do this all throughout the world. There's plenty of airlines that offer cadetships and different ways that you can jump through programs that put you in a position to fly.
Yep.
That comes with, in many cases, a debt. It comes with a form of student loan. And you have to pay that off over time. And that's fine. It's a very good way, very proven for a lot of people. For those who are young enough right now, or parents who have kids who may want to pursue this, if you take the road, and I'm an advocate for this, if you take the road of learning to fly at, say, 14, 15, 16, you can, and I'm the perfect example of that, you can fund it yourself through a little bit of hard work. I washed dishes for years at a local restaurant and paid all my flying off. I had a commercial pilot's license by the time I was 18, just when I left high school. So I had the equivalent of a college degree by the time I left high school, and I had self-funded it. I had no student debt, nothing. So here I was in a position at 20, able to go out and invest in other things, go and buy a jet ski or a car, or, invest in stocks and shares or whatever, or an investment property. I didn't do that. I bought a jet ski. But I was in a position to do that, whereas a lot of my buddies had waited. They had spent their younger years just doing whatever, and they didn't really have any money in the bank. And now they had the same license that I had, but they had a lot of student debt. So it's not, there are other ways, and student debt isn't necessarily a super bad thing. But if you are young, you have an opportunity to spread that expense out into really achievable bite-sized chunks and be debt-free with an amazing, amazing skill set behind you. I think that is the answer to your second question. It's the answer to one of the hardest elements of flying, and that is, I am putting so much money into this. And, that's hard. It doesn't matter what you do. It is hard to part with those type of funds for something that's not tangible, such as a house or an investment of some form.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, so you touched on sort of, a career, getting a cadetship with the idea of being a commercial pilot. And of course, that's one thing that we can do or look at. I say we, like I'm a pilot. It's one thing a pilot can do to turn their passion and love for flying into a career. But there must be more avenues than just flying for Qantas or American Airlines, whoever it might be. And I don't know, maybe fill us in a little bit on that, because again, people watching at home or listening might be going, well, what else is there? How do I actually turn it into a money-making thing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, look, there are so many avenues in the aviation industry, and I'm talking everything from, if you want to make money, if you want to go out and, you don't just have to be an airline pilot. You can go and own a flight school. You can be a flying instructor. You can go and fly. My brother puts out fires with airplanes. You can go and spray crops. You can go and fly helicopters around New York on scenic flights. You can do incredible, incredible things. So that's in the revenue kind of, commercial world. In the fun world, and as everyone has heard in the intro about my story, I now no longer fly commercially due to my accident and spinal cord injury. I now own an aeroplane. He's affectionately known as Doug. He was built in 1952, and he is a Piper Super Cub. So it's a very well-known bush plane. It's got really big tires. It's got shocks on the landing gear. It flies really slow. And I can take off and land that in maybe a third of a football field, a really, really short distance. So it's designed to do all sorts of off-airport flying. Now, flying privately, you can fly everything from a little business jet privately to an aerobatic airplane that goes upside down. You can enter aerobatic competitions. You can fly bush flying. You can here's a picture of flying the helicopter. You can jump in a helicopter and go fly for fun and fly to your local restaurant and land. You can do incredible. You can fly up and down the beach if you want to and look for sharks if you're in that area of the world. What I'm saying is, if you jump on YouTube especially, you will see worlds to explore just in the bush flying side of aviation. You will see a guy who flies a powered parachute, lands on a soccer field next to McDonald's so he can go and buy a cheeseburger. You'll see people who enter aerobatic competitions, end up flying air shows. You'll see people who simply gather, whether it's the world's biggest air show in Wisconsin, 15,000 airplanes every year, whether it's a local pancake breakfast on a Saturday morning, like this here, a Piper Cub gathering where we all flew in our Piper Cubs at a friend's airstrip in Australia. And, it just had a social aspect that revolved around aviation. It is honestly just unending. Getting your license is a ticket to explore the wide world of aviation as a pilot. You can explore it now without your license. You can start to learn about, all right, I really think that appeals to me, landing on riverbeds and going fishing next to my airplane. Or I really think flying through the clouds and through bad weather and IFR flying A to B is really important because it allows me to travel, with my family and my friends. It is a world to explore. So
good. I mean, that again, that I'm inspired.
You are getting your pilot's license. You are going for your first lesson. Let's lock that in.
So this kind of, you've mentioned so many different types of things, and there's such a range of almost, I would suggest, personality fits. And so when I was younger, a mate of mine, Crowe, his dad was a commercial pilot for Cathay Pacific. Yep. And I asked him, what's, the secret to being a pilot? And he said, well, the best pilots are ones that go unnoticed. Commercial pilots, you never have to think about them because there's never any risk. They're very risk averse. They're very measured. And that very much reflected Crowe's dad. He was very measured. He had this nice little pair of glasses and he used to do this and just put them up on his nose, and very measured individual. However, I'm wondering whether you've mentioned aerobatics and these bush planes and, being in the military, and flying jets. Is it almost that people, again, listening should take into account what kind of personality they have, and that should also guide the direction that they move forward in terms of whether it's a career or even just passion within flying?
Yeah, I think your personality will help determine that. And you find that, and again, as you mentioned it, the military is a whole nother different avenue that you can go down in the world of flying, and a super cool one at that. Personality will determine where your interests fall, but it has to be personality partnered with experience. So you got to make sure that you don't sit here on day one after your first trial instructional flight and decide that you're going to be a low-level airshow pilot. You need to make sure that you're like, okay, let's work through this. Let's explore all the different avenues and, make sure we take baby steps, to get to wherever we want to be. But if you are an adrenaline junkie, you will be able to scratch that itch. If you are a very risk-averse, cautious human, and you might have a partner who's scared of flying or so on and so forth, there are so many avenues. I mean, the airplane I flew around the world had a parachute. The airplane had a parachute. You pull the handle and the airplane floats down to the ground if something goes wrong. So, there are so many ways that you can cater for all personality types. You just have to get that experience and just take it, one step at a time.
Yeah. The way you've described this just over this interview, this fireside, just makes it like so palatable. And I mean, really, it makes it seem quite simple. I thought, oh, geez, we're going to have to talk for a long time to get to the root of this. But I feel like, and this is the beauty of setting a goal and then actually looking into it, how to move forward. It's not that complicated. And I love that. And I'm going to ask a silly question because it's in my head. But again, maybe I don't know. This will make people laugh at the very least, but perhaps it's interesting. Every time I'm on a plane, I think of a scenario where, and I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say.
I know what you're going to say.
The pilot passes out. He doesn't die. He passes out. For some reason, they need a pilot. Across the intercom, they're like, okay, does anyone know how to fly a plane? There is nobody. So then they say, well, who wants to have a go? I would put my hand up for sure and go in and try and land this plane. What are the chances that I can land a commercial jet on a runway?
The situation is definitely that both pilots had fish, and that the fish was bad. That's the deal.
Ah,
And that's why one always has to have chicken, one has to have fish. But that is something that's been thought about a lot over the years from different pilots, and everyone likes to think they could. I was lucky enough to jump into quantum simulators in Australia as a reasonably experienced pilot who'd flown multi-engine light twins. And I was able to jump in the 747 simulator, the airplane that I dreamed to fly when I was a kid. And I could fly that airplane honestly quite well. It was the same basic concepts of flight, in a small two-seater applied to the large aircraft. I believe a level-headed human who could stay calm and look for the right buttons and do what they're being told from, you would need assistance from the ground, could do it. They say you could teach a monkey to fly if you have enough bananas. So I think you could be the right monkey for the job.
I love it. So hang on, that's amazing. So I am now going to tell people, I'm not even, because I used to say, I wonder whether I'm just going to tell people I can.
I could definitely do it. Yeah, that's what you need to tell people. I'm the guy for the job. Yeah.
Mate, that's awesome. Well, look, honestly, I do a lot of these firesides, and I'm very fortunate to, be in the company of amazing people like yourself. So I thank you so much for just sharing what you have. And I just think this is so incredible. And you think of flying and you think of being up there and the clouds and a sunset and all these marvelous things and exploration around the world as you've done, and landing on the side of a riverbed and fishing next to a plane, which you've met. I mean, I've never even thought about that. Maybe just as your last piece, because it's very clear what the advice is. It's just go and do it. Research, do it, work hard. Maybe the question I want to ask is just just leave us with this. What does flying mean to you? What has it allowed you in your life from, in any perspective that you choose to take the question?
Okay. So flying for me has changed my life. It has determined the direction that my life has taken since I was very, very young. It has provided me the best moments from, I have seen the whole world, glaciers, deserts, oceans, islands, coral atolls popping out of the Pacific, 60,000 foot thunderstorms, icing on the aircraft. I have seen Sicily and Italy. I've seen Saudi Arabia and Oman from an airplane. I've met the royals. I've published a book. I've done all these things thanks to aviation, all really highs. Aviation, after my accident, also gave me the absolute worst, and it is the hardest time of my life has come from aviation. Out the other side of that, knowing how safe flying is, I jumped straight back in the airplane, straight out of my wheelchair, straight in the airplane, and I continue to fly. It is a part of my life. I cross paths with people all the time who are scared to fly. All right. So if you remove the financial aspect, which I think we've done, there's a lot of people who are scared to fly. I want you to think of it this way. And I always say to anyone who flies with me as a passenger, you've got to have a steer. You've got to rock the wings left and right, just like you did when you were a kid. For anyone who doesn't want to do it, I always say, I'm not going to let anything go wrong. But think of it this way. 75 years ago, let's just rough figure, 75 years ago, that was around about the time in history where aviation, our ability to climb into a flying machine and take off and escape, gravity in a way and see the world from a whole different perspective, became accessible to the average man. 75 years ago, my grandparents are 80. We are living in a time where we are so unbelievably lucky to be given aviation in the way that it is. And it's never been more accessible since social media and the internet really grabbed the world and, kind of just has all this information for us. So it has changed my life. It is an amazing tool to teach responsibility and respect and patience and goal setting and all of that stuff. It is amazing for young kids to be a part of aviation, especially learning. It teaches all sorts of really good qualities at that point in life. It is just all around a positive experience. Don't fear the finance. Don't fear the flying. Just go and book in that first lesson. Jump in a machine. Go flying. Go and network. Go and find the communities that are everywhere for you, just in your neighborhood, your local airport. Go and talk to people. Aviation's a real big family and people will want to share it. So I'm excited for all the people to watch this and go and do something. And I'm excited to hear from those people, honestly, who see this and then do something based off this fireside chat, including you.
Oh, mate. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, what a way to wrap this up. And again, for anyone listening or watching, I'm going to put Ryan's details in the show notes or what have you. And I'm sure you'd be more than open to helping people.
Please, yeah. Send me an email. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, mate, thank you so much. You're a legend. We didn't even get into your story of circumnavigating the world and surviving a plane crash, and for another time, in terms of just helping and passing on what you know. Just stunning stuff, mate. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. Appreciate it.